Welcome to another episode of the Fortitude Forum. I'm your host, Bill Burke, and I am really amped up for today's guest. He is a leader. He is an aspiring and soon-to-be author, and I'm going to ask him about that a little bit later. But he's also currently the CEO of FitBody Bootcamp. He is Bryce Henson. Bryce, welcome to the show.
Bill, my friend, thanks so much for having me. Super pumped up to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think we have a lot of alignment in our worlds and we share a lot of the same philosophies. So I'm excited for you to be here. I got some questions for you, obviously, but I'm really excited for the listeners to be able to take away some of the things that you've learned and all this knowledge that you're accumulating and have accumulated in your life, not just personally, but also in the world of business as well. And I mentioned that you're now the CEO of FitBody Bootcamp. And you're running this fitness empire, which I love, and I could talk to you all day about because fitness and health is a passion of mine as well. But it wasn't always that way. It took a lot for you to get to where you are now. So I want to go back a little bit. Even though you're running this big empire and this big business right now, you started with some adversity. You started in a broken home. There were some tough choices. So what was it about those early experiences that really open your eyes to what would be necessary in the way of resilience and mental toughness?
I love that. So I always say that I grew up in the Midwest, which is true. We have the Michigan connection and also our same university in common. But the first 10 years of my life, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. And the reason was my father was stationed in the Army there. And it was interesting, Bill. It was a very volatile first 10 years of my life. And the reason that is because my father was a drug addict. He was addicted to alcohol and gambling. Not the trifecta for a good family upbringing, very candidly. However, it taught me a lot about resilience, about overcoming adversity, and also about human dynamics. When I was a younger boy, not knowing when my dad was going to come home, if he was going to come home in a good state, a bad state, a drunken state, a rage state. So I learned about human nature. I learned how to read people. You alluded to my book, which is coming out early 2026, which is titled Turn Adversity to Advantage. When I look back, it was certainly a volatile situation and something that I wouldn't want to repeat again. But there was a lot of learning lessons that I learned about the things I just shared. Also about the family dynamic. And I'm so grateful for my mom. She had the courage to get us out of that situation. I became very close with her, my brother, my sister. So there was many silver linings. And I think that's probably a good lesson from that. When you're going through hardship, when you're going through adversity, when you're going through challenge, it doesn't feel good in the moment, but there's a lot of learning lessons you can take with you and apply to you in the future. And that's probably how I would sum up and showcase that advantage of the first probably 10 years initially, but as it transitioned into my adulthood, going to school and now being a professional who I am today.
We've met a few times and talked several others. You seem like a very even keel guy, which I am as well. And I pride myself on not getting too high or too low. And you seem that way as well. But I've got to imagine that when you were a kid in those first 10 years and being surrounded by all the adversity, or not just the adversity, but the uncertainty of your father and not exactly knowing a lot of the answers to those questions that you just mentioned, how did you avoid feeling or being injected with anxiety, or were you that way? And if so, now you're not. How was that transition, or how did you go from where you were then emotionally to where you are now?
I think I developed a ton, and factory installed, I would not say I'm an even keeled guy. I'm fiery. In the first 15 years, I was like high in emotion. But what I learned is, you know this to be true in sports and high pressure environments, you can't be overly emotional. You need to be able to leverage it as a tool to get fired up when you need to. But in the grand scheme of things, you need to be cool, calm, and collected under pressure. So I would actually say that's not my factory installed way I am, but through that volatility, through that challenge and hardship, I learned a ton. And then as I progressed in high school and college and then the business world and becoming a business owner, and then eventually the vice president and the CEO and a co-owner of an international franchise, I'm in a high pressure stakes environment all the time. Nothing goes right. There's always fires. There's always challenges. And whether that's business, whether that's in the sports field, whether that's in life in general. So through those experiences, it allowed me to keep cool under pressure. And I appreciate that observation. If you ask my team, that they would reinforce that. One of my biggest strengths as a leader is no matter what the situation, no matter whether we're winning, whether we're losing, whatever adversity comes with us, they'll look to me as the stoic, they'll look to me as the calm boat in the rocky sea.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's so necessary and maybe overlooked and underrated. Now, going back to your childhood again, you started to work at an early age, probably out of necessity. What did those early experiences teach you about, or maybe how did they lead you to all your business success now? Because you mentioned you've got a lot of plates spinning right now in the business world. And I imagine that those early lessons about work ethic have shaped where you are now as well.
Absolutely. And I say this very lovingly. My mother is an amazing lady. She's a great lady. She's not a strong lady, and that's no knock. It just is what it is. So when she got us out of that situation, when she mustered up all that courage, I was super grateful, and it changed our life in a very positive way. But I could sense very young, like 11 years old. Actually, we got out of there from Georgia when I was 8 or 9 years old. We moved to the state of Michigan where she grew up, which is why I landed and grew up in suburbs of Metro Detroit, and then eventually went to Michigan State, which we share that in common. But very quickly, I realized that, wow, my mom needs some help. And I had two choices. I either could be part of the problem or part of the burden, if you will, or I could be part of the solution. So it was out of need and necessity, but it was also like out of this internal fortitude that I just had this observation and I wanted to be part of the solution. And I was very grateful at a young age. I could sense like her love and her care for me and my siblings, but I also sensed that she was overwhelmed. And I thought to myself, I'm going to be part of the solution. I love sports growing up. I was never a big kid. In fact, I hit my growth spurt, but not until I was 17, my senior year in high school. So I was always the little guy. So I loved football. I loved basketball, but I just genetically wasn't wired for that. I could do way better on the soccer field because you don't necessarily have to have the size and the height, if you will. But I was always scrappy. I was always a hustler. So I saw an opportunity, one, to become an athlete in that way, but also because I love the game. I heard at a young age that in the state of Michigan, you could be 12 years old to be a soccer referee. And in fact, at the age of 11, you could enroll in the classes. And thought to myself, wow, that's an incredible opportunity. So I took that. And when I was 12 years old, I was making $15 a soccer match and 20 a soccer match when I was 13 or 14, where I could be the main referee. And that was big money back in the day. In fact, my mom says at the age of 12 or 13, I started making more money than her and was able to help her, the household, myself, and my siblings. So it was out of need, it was out of necessity, and my desire to be a contributor would help my mom.
Yeah, man, we had more in common than we even realized. One of my first jobs was refereeing like youth girls softball. And man, when I got that, I don't even remember what it was, 10 or 15 bucks. I thought that was all the money in the world too. I didn't love the fact that the parents were yelling at me though. I had to get out of that rather quickly, but learned a lot of lessons like you did. No, I love that. I love those stories. In addition to that, was there because we all have these memories. Some of them we don't remember, some things we remember very specifically. So was there a specific incident that you just can point to and say, man, that was the absolute lowest point, rock bottom of my entire childhood experience before I learned how to actually turn this adversity around?
Was interesting. There's such a dichotomy in life, and everyone goes through challenge and hardship. In the grand scheme of things, I always like to look at this. And at the time, it felt horrible. It felt extremely challenging. And what added to that, which it was a blessing, but when we moved to the state of Michigan, it was up to my mom to take care of us. We lived with our grandma who took us in. She was 75 years old at the time. She already had 4 kids and raised them. And she was by no stretch of the imagination expecting or even ready to take in her daughter and then 3 grandchildren, but she did. And that was otherwise, if it wasn't for her, we would have been in a shelter or worse. Super grateful for her. I had a wealthy uncle actually, and he didn't provide us financial support, but he believed in private education. So we actually went to private school, which was great from an education, a structure, and discipline perspective. But Bill, as we know, comparison is the thief of joy. So when we were put in that situation, it was very clear that our socioeconomic situation was very different than the rest of the kids. So that created a complex where we felt, and I felt, that we had less than, which we did if you looked around. But of course, in my later life, traveling the world, living in a third world country in Brazil, and seeing what actual real poverty is, that created a huge perspective and a huge change in perspective in that dynamic. But going through it, it felt horrible. I think being put in that situation, I could understand and be grateful for the structure of a private school. My mom was very religious. So it was a Catholic school. So there was a lot of value there. But I think the silver lining and really what got me out of the mindset, or at least put me into motion, was just the feeling of, hey, we were less than. And I thought to myself, like, I hated that feeling, and I had pride. I didn't want anyone to pity me or my situation. So I thought to myself, if it has to be, it's up to me. And that was probably the landing when I was 10 years old in that period of time was the hardest landing, but it really lit a fire in my butt, and it put me in a situation where I understood the value of work ethic, and it laid the foundation for good things. And that kind of is a story that I talk about in my book, Turn Adversity into Advantage, because it felt really bad, and pain is a big driver. It can be a really good thing if you channel it for the good. And that's what I did.
Yeah, just listening to you tell that story, it sounds like a really difficult environment, but you're right. It sounds like there were many more blessings in there than adversity. It might have taken you some time to actually figure that out. I'm sure it did, but yeah, it sounds like you really came out of it the best way possible. So I'm curious, how did fitness actually become a part of your world? Not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally as well, because you and I both know the endless benefits that it has for all of us if we take advantage of those. But and physical is obviously the biggest one, but I'm just curious, mentally and emotionally, what has fitness done for you?
Holy smokes, Bill. Love that question. Grateful for this is my business. What I would say to that point, it first started as a vanity metric. And then within about 2 years of the journey, it turned into emotional, a mindset, a clarity, and ethos, like a way of life. As I mentioned, I had an athletic background growing up, playing soccer specifically. I kicked for the football team my senior year just because I had that particular skill set, but I was always the runt. I was always the smallest, different than you. I know in your story, when you look at any of my sports pictures, they line you up from the tallest to the smallest, and you could just find Bryce the very bottom. And I had a chip on my shoulder, though. It actually turned out to be my advantage because I thought to myself, you know what? I'm just going to outwork my competition. I was going to out hustle my competition. And that's what I did. But when I went to Michigan State, similar to you, where you were an amazing athlete for our university, I turned to be a frat boy, and I just let go of the fitness game. And so that was, I guess, probably the end of my teens into my early 20s. Fast food, Taco Bell was a staple in my diet. So I was by no stretch of the imagination, a specimen of fitness. But that changed after I graduated from Michigan State. In early 2005, I moved to Southern California, Los Angeles. And this story is so trivial when I look back at it, but it's going back to the story of like human nature feeling pain. Los Angeles certainly is a beautiful place, but it also can be the plastic capital of the world when you're 21 years young, 3,000 miles from home, don't have any friend networks or professional skill sets to offer the world. So the first 2 years of my journey, I had more dark days than good. But I developed some friends. I always had that ability. And I'll never forget, I was out at a pool party in LA, feeling overwhelmed and underwhelmed in myself and my physique to begin with. And one of my buddies, actually from college, thought it was a great idea, as we were talking to some girls, to turn to me and said, Bryce, dude, what's going on over there, man? I can't see your chest. It looks like you have islands for nipples. And Bill, it sounds so trivial when I look back, but like when I heard that comment, I was super embarrassed. Like inside, I was like, oh my God, I was embarrassed at myself. I was frustrated at myself and also the comment. And that pain point lit a fire. One of my buddies that went to Michigan State with me, he was from the west side of Michigan. He moved out to California. He was in the crowd. He wasn't the one who said it. And he was the fitness guy, though, six-pack abs, glistening muscles. So the next day I rolled up we lived together for the better part of 2 years. I said, Adam, you got to teach me a little thing about this fitness game. And he turns to me and he's, Bryce, I thought you never asked, but if we're going to do this, you saw how many guys in college asked me how to be fit, but actually never follow through. I need your 12-week commitment. We're going to lift what I want you to lift. We're going to train how you want. I'm going to train. You're going to train how I want you to train. You're going to eat how I want you to eat. And then after the 12 weeks, we can make a decision if this is for you. And I'm so glad he made me have that commitment, because as we know, when you're first starting out in fitness or anything, it's a good metaphor for anything in life. It's hard. The resistance is there, but I put one foot in front of the other. I felt like quitting every single day of that first 12 weeks, but I saw a result within a short period of time. Within 6 months, I dropped 20 pounds of body fat, put on 20 pounds of lean muscle. And going back to the beginning, it was initially for the vanity. I just wanted a better physique. I wanted to have more confidence. I want to be able to have more confidence when me chatting with girls. And it did that. But then very quickly, within the first year or two, my mental clarity, my confidence, just everything changed. In fact, my sales career. I went from the least performing sales rep in the company all the way to the highest performing sales rep in my company at the time. And Bill, nothing changed in terms of the follow-up process, the prospecting process, my sales script. It was just my confidence. And I knew very quickly within the first year or two within the fitness and getting into that this was going to be a lifelong thing. And now when I look back, yeah, I'd like to have a good physique, just like anyone, but more so I do it for the mental clarity and the confidence and just the ethos. It just gives me so much, which is the reason that's part of my business to this day.
Man, what a story. And that is powerful. And I'm with you on that. I still lift weights and love it. Not so much for the physical stuff like you, but man, the awareness and the mental clarity that you mentioned that comes from that. I never noticed that when I was younger. I was just doing it for the physical results. But man, that is a transformative story and that carries a lot of power. And I imagine that you get to work with a lot of people who are behind you in that journey in this fit body sphere that you're a part of. So is there somebody that stands out specifically that you have helped go through that transformation that you yourself experience as well?
Absolutely. And it's also, I'm going to tell you the story, but this is just like an empowering message that you can turn your darkest hour, your darkest day, you can turn the biggest mess in your life and make it your message. And to answer your point, my dear friend, my colleague, my coworker, my franchise business consultant, one of them, her name's Daryl Ann, and she joined our organization as a client 9 years ago. And she lost 200 pounds in her journey. Now, she didn't lose all the 200 with FitBody. She was about halfway of her journey, but she lost a good 100 pounds in her journey as a client by entering the doors of FitBody Bootcamp. And when she talks about her life, she didn't have any before pictures or very few of them because she was always behind her husband or behind her kids and just feeling the shame of that. And if you've ever been overweight, if you're listening to this or watching this right now, or you've had any other problem that you're embarrassed of, you can certainly relate to this particular story. But she decided enough was enough. And she realized that it wasn't going to happen overnight. She put one foot in front of the other. She put her hand up for some coaching. She entered the doors of FitBody Bootcamp. And within 2 years, she finished that 180-pound transformation. Literally, nearly 200 pounds of body fat was just taken from her willingness to step into our facility and our ecosystem. And that was the first step of the journey. And it inspired her so much that her friend in the process, who was actually a fitness guy, thought to himself, hey, since you've had this amazing transformation, why don't we inspire other people? So they decided, I want to say in 2018 timeframe, to open their own FitBody Bootcamp. And they're based in Southern California in Fresno. Her name's Daryl Lynn. She's an amazing human being. Her business partner, Michael Rodriguez. So that was their next step in the journey. Once she got fit and she had this new level of confidence, she decided to turn her mess, her previous lack of fitness, into her message. I can help other people through fitness and fat loss and weight loss and through business ownership within our studio. So she did that. And she became very quickly, within the first few years, very successful. And I took notice, my team took notice, and I decided to reach out to her and recruit her to be a nutrition coach because she was having very good success coaching other people in the same situation as her. So we brought her on board as our main fitness, or excuse me, nutrition coach here at FitBody Bootcamp. And then over the last 2 years, this past year, January of 2025, ended up bringing her on board as one of our FBCs, our franchise business consultants. So now she's coaching other franchise partners within our system. So she is like a shining light, an amazing example of someone who turned her worst aspect, her biggest embarrassment of her life, into a situation where now she's not only done this for herself, but leading other people. And it's been extremely inspiring. So there's many more stories, but since you asked, Daryl Lynn, I want to give you a huge shout out if you're listening or watching this. You're a shining star to many other people.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm sure there's hundreds, if not thousands, more of those stories. I want to just pause for a second and go back for the listeners. I forgot to mention or point out one thing I caught that you said when you were telling the story about the pool party and what your inspiration for getting in shape was, is guys, pay attention to this. Bryce took action the very next day. He called up his buddy who was very physically fit. He didn't wait a month or a year. He said, no, I'm doing this now. I'm changing my life and I'm taking some action. So kudos to Bryce. And of course, anybody that's listening, if you're thinking about doing something, if you're thinking about it, you want to do it. So might as well just save yourself some time and get after it. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about leadership. You've got this, you're leading the charge as the CEO of FitBody Bootcamp. But before that, you had your own franchise. You expanded to multiple locations. You got into more of a leadership role. And leadership is so difficult. And I think it's really undercoached and underrated as well. What's one or two of the hardest leadership lessons that you've learned along the way that some of the listeners who are in those roles can take away today?
One of the biggest leadership lessons that I've learned, the hardest one, is we are all leaders. At the end of the day, you need to lead yourself. So maybe you're listening and watching this and you don't have any desire to lead a big organization or even your own business. That's okay. At the end of the day, you need to be a leader of you. You need to be able to lead yourself to a better life, both physically, mentally, emotionally, financially. Self-leadership is where it all starts. As the famous adage says, put on your oxygen mask on first. You need to be able to do that before you can help any other people. And I learned that initially from my experience as a FitBody Bootcamp owner. So I told you the story about my transformation, about the Islands for Nipple story, why I wanted to get into fitness. And at that period of time, actually before that, I never thought I was going to get into fitness or gym ownership or business ownership. But when I went through that particular transformation, I became very productive and very successful in my sales career. And I thought that's what I was going to do until one guy walked up to me at the gym about 2 years in my journey. He said, "Hey, I've been seeing how you lift weights. I'm curious how your nutrition was going and how that protocol is." And this light bulb went off, like how Daryl Lynn, maybe I can give this gift of fitness back to other people. So I got certified as a personal trainer. And then eventually one thing led to the other. And I found FitBody Bootcamp and I decided to open up my own franchise location. And I was in the mindset, I'm a fit guy. I want to be able to provide fitness and nutrition and coaching to other people. And I did. But what happened is my business started to grow. And never did I really think it through that I was going to have a team of people now relying on me. And what I realized is if you can coach someone in fitness or nutrition, that's certainly one skill set, but it's very different than leading a team of people. And I learned very quickly that I had to develop this completely other skill set. I was thinking the sales, the marketing, the coaching, which coaching can be a variation of leadership for sure. But I realized very quickly within the first 6 months of my business ownership, I needed to take the self-leadership skill set to a completely different level and be able to lead other people. And that's when I really had this big aha that I needed to become a leader of others as well. And thankfully, I love people. I love building teams. Similar to you, Bill, I had a sports background growing up. I was the smallest guy, but I was the guy that would just instill leadership and energy. I was the captain of my soccer team growing up throughout my sports career. All this to say is that was the big moment, this aha moment that I realized, oh, wow, I have to develop this other skill set. And because I love people, teams, building, business, it just worked out and became part of my ethos. And from that period of time, I realized that I need to study this. So your former coach over the last 15 years has been this giant mentor from afar, the great Nick Saban, other leaders like John Gordon, John Maxwell. I've realized that leadership is a skill set that can be developed. And that's what I've been on the path to do for the last 20 years.
So in your estimation, then, what is the number one priority in leadership when you're building a business or whether you're leading yourself? And is there just one? Is it culture? Is it communication? What's the very first step?
A concept from my perspective called moral authority. And what I mean by that is walking your own talk. Leadership, in the words of John Maxwell, is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So if you can influence yourself, for example, if you're going to say, I'm going to work out today, and you actually work out today, you influence yourself to do that, you are leading yourself. If you can influence someone else, therefore you are leading someone else. So the best way to do that is not, of course, communication is an ally. Leadership is a skill set without a shadow of a doubt. But we've all seen those people that talk a big game and they don't follow through on that. And then guess what? Human nature, the way we're wired, that has very little influence. So I realized, and what I've learned is moral authority, being able to walk your own talk, is by far the biggest leadership characteristic. Because what I've also learned in leadership is we all want to be the perfect leader and give the perfect talk. And what I realized is that you can get better at things, absolutely, but that's impossible. People will follow you for who you are. And if you have a good moral authority about you, if you do what you say you're going to do, people will follow that. So I think foundationally, that's mission critical for your success. And the other thing you talk about, you just mentioned, is culture. When you're leading a big group of people, culture is mission critical. And part of culture is having a strong feedback culture. And remember, as a young leader, I was scared of feedback. I shy away from feedback. And when I realized that was a big error. And if you can deal with the pain, the sting of feedback when it's not great and when you mess up, but ultimately you can face the roses, you can watch the game film, you can see yourself presenting, or if you're a fitness coach, if you can watch the game film and see, oh, the good, the bad, the ugly, if you can go through the process of learning about yourself through feedback and create a strong feedback culture, that's also another really mission critical element to the leadership game from my lens and what I've learned.
Man, I really appreciate and admire that answer. I think so often we overlook those foundational parts of leadership. And I tried to get you to skip right to maybe step 4 or 5, and you didn't take the bait. And I love that you brought it back a little bit and just talked about walk of the walk, which so many people are really good at, standing up in front of other people and saying the right things, but they're not necessarily carrying those things out in their own life as well. So that is so good. Now, for somebody listening to this right now who maybe they're thinking, I identify really closely with what Bryce is saying and his journey. I think I might want to start to go down some of the same roads that he has gone down because I want to taste some of that success as well. What advice would you give them in terms of specifically not being overwhelmed by the grind of it, and even more specifically by the uncertainty? I think one of the crucial characteristics of all the people that are ultra successful in life, in and outside of sports and health and fitness, is that they can continue forward even when there's all this uncertainty. And I certainly battle that every single day, and I know you do too. So is there one piece of advice that you would give to them to encourage them to continue to walk through that smoke even when they can't see the outcome?
Yeah, absolutely. And this brings it back to some of our conversations and what you learned at Michigan State and through your time working with Nick Saban is you got to have big goals and big dreams. There's no doubt about that. Like from a leadership perspective, if you're going to lead your life, to have a productive life and a life worth lived, you need to have a goal. You need to have a target. That is mission critical to success. But in order to get there, you need to be able to break it down in bite-sized chunks. And the process is something that I've really been mission critically focused on over the last 15 years of my leadership journey. And right now it's the end of October and the World Series is on. And I just keep on thinking that the hometown team for me, living in Los Angeles, the Dodgers, were behind by 3-2 against the Blue Jays. And there's potentially 2 games left, but when you break it down, it's inning by inning. It's focusing on 1 inning at a time. There's 3 outs per time. And if I'm in that bullpen, which I'm not a baseball expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought to myself, if I was like interjected and I had to lead the team, I would say, forget about yes, we want to win the World Series. Yes, Los Angeles Dodgers, we need to win 2 games in order to win the World Series, but let's not focus about that. Let's focus about taking 1 inning at a time, 1 bat at a time, because really at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. And you can apply that to football, basketball, sports. You can apply that to business. You can apply that into life. If you have that big target, that big goal, but if you can break it down to what's the next step I have to take, that would be for sure my strong piece of advice, to be able to have the mental fortitude to continue to charge the mountain and gain traction at your big goal.
On the money, my old coach Saban, you mentioned, would say outcomes are distractions. And he taught me that first and foremost. Yeah, such a great answer as well. You've clearly evolved a ton over the years, not just as a human being, but as a leader as well. So I'm curious if you could give your younger self just one piece of advice, or even tell your younger self something about how you are today. What's one thing that maybe that younger version of you wouldn't believe about where you are now?
Incredible question. So if I look back to my younger self when I was 17, 18 years old, going into college, if you would have told me that I'm the CEO of an international fitness franchise based in Los Angeles, California, I would have thought you were freaking out of your mind, off your rocker. And I say that very grateful for the success that I've been able to achieve, but also as a source of inspiration to your listeners. If you're listening to this and watching this right now, there might be a big goal that you have, and you might feel imposter syndrome. You might feel there's no way that I can actually do that. And maybe you're right in the sense of the version of you right now. But going back to the thing that we just talked about, putting one step in front of the other, figure out the North Star, like where do you want to go, and keep on and take one step, put one step in front of the other. And one big learning lesson and value point in my life, I've never been afraid to put my hand in the air and humbly say, I don't know what I'm doing. I need some coaching. And another thing that's super empowering, and I learned this in sharing actually this story about my father being a drug addict and addict to alcohol, et cetera. The cycle repeated with me is a very humbling moment in time, Bill, when I realized in my early 30s that I had a problem with alcohol that I didn't foresee. Now I'm a recovering alcoholic. If I don't drink alcohol until the end of the year, it'll be 9 years of sobriety, which is incredible.
Awesome.
Thank you for that. But it was a very humbling moment for me to realize that. Now, I guess bringing this full circle, I wasn't the type of alcoholic like my father where my life was in shambles and I was out of work and all this. I was always very successful. I actually used it as a release on the weekends. I was more of a binge drinker, if you say. If I have one drink, then I can't stop. So that was the way that I drank alcohol. But all this to say is, going back to the point, I've never been afraid to put my hand in the air and say, like, I need help. I did that when I walked into the 12-step program that I'm an active part of this in 2017. I realized, okay, I'm not a daily drinker. I'm a different alcoholic than what I envision, but I still have a problem with this and I need help. I did the same thing with Adam in fitness. I was like, hey, Adam, like, I'm not a fit guy. You're a fit guy. Can you please help me? I did the same thing when I became a franchise partner of FitBody Bootcamp. I was like, hey, I'm a fitness guy. I want to have a big impact of inspiring fitness and changing lives and helping my community. But I don't know how to run a business. I know how to sell. I learned that my skill set, but I don't know how to market. I don't know how to lead. I don't know how to run operations. So I put my hand up in the air and said, I don't know how to do this. I want to find some coaching and mentorship to show me that way. So for me, that's been a huge part of my journey, is realizing that we all go through imposter syndrome and we all go through the challenges of trying to accomplish something. But if you humble yourself, if you put your hand in the air and say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I want to get there. Can you help me? It's been game changing in my career, in my life, in my business. And that's how I can look back, coming full circle 20 years ago, when I look at more than 20 years ago now. And if I told my younger self, I'm this leader of this international fitness franchise, you'd be out of your mind. But I just applied the principles I just shared. And the empowering message is, if you're listening and watching this, you can do the same thing.
Absolutely. And I think that thing you just described is what holds a lot of people back. It's almost prideful in a sense, but it's keeping a lot of people from reaching the best version of themselves. So that is such a great answer. And it's difficult to do it. It's difficult to master that, to put your pride aside and raise your hand, like you said, and say, hey, I need some help. So good. I'm interested, though, as a fitness person as well, and this doesn't have to be a fitness answer, but is there one little ritual that we can give the listeners that they can implement today that you perform each and every day, maybe even without thinking about it, that helps you keep your edge as a leader, as a speaker, even as a coach, as a CEO? What's one little thing that's in your routine every single day that you couldn't really live without?
I'm an early riser, and what I realized is I work out. I do three things in the morning when I wake up. I work out, I do a 10-minute sauna, and then I do a 3-minute cold plunge. And maybe you're thinking, Bryce, I don't have a cold plunge, or I don't have a sauna. That's okay. I didn't have one for a long time either. You can do a cold shower. You can get a 25-minute body weight workout. You can move your body for sure. So those are the three things that I do every single morning. I create momentum in my day that are non-negotiable. And I just showed with you, like, I do a 30-minute workout. I'm not doing a 3-hour CrossFit workout, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're a great CrossFitter, go fight, more power to you. But my point here is, body in motion stays in motion. And what I realize is, if I get up and I do something that is really hard to begin with, it creates momentum in my life. The second thing, and kind of around the same vein, is I'm an early riser. And that's really important because that also helps me create momentum. The question always is, Bryce, how do you wake up at 4 o'clock? I'm not going to bed at midnight or 1 o'clock. And what I realized is, everyone has a different body rhythm and routine, et cetera. But what I found leading and coaching people for a long period of time is, people that even say they're night owls, examine yourself. How productive are you really after 10 o'clock? And the answer is many times no. You're watching Netflix, you're watching the news, you're not doing things that are productive. So what I've learned at a young age, actually, when I was going through college, I read the quote by Benjamin Franklin: early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. And I didn't act on it in the moment, but that stuck with me. And after I graduated from college, after I moved out west, I started that practice. And Bill, it's been a game changer for me. So I go to bed, I'm sleeping by 9 o'clock every single night. That allows me to get up at 4 o'clock every morning. That allows me to get my 4:30 workout. And I'm at work, like at this desk that you're seeing me on this video right now at 6 o'clock. And when I've already had a good night rest, when I've already worked out my body and had mental clarity, endorphins are going, and I'm at my desk working at 6 o'clock, holy smokes, like the momentum is at my side. That's been a huge hack, if you will, and a big part of my success.
So much value in that answer. And it's just so important that people find, like you mentioned, what works best for them. And the awareness aspect of it is huge as well. Because, like you said, what works for you might not work for everybody that's listening. But man, there is a lot of value in what Bryce just said, and take whatever you want from that and apply it to your own life. Bryce, this has been great. Just a couple more quick questions, and then I'll let you go. So, what's next for you? What are you excited about building? I know you mentioned the book, and I want to hear more about that as well. But what is on the horizon for you, and what are you hoping to accomplish in the near future?
Yeah, thank you for that. There's three things that come front of mind on that. Number one is to continue to build the foundation and grow FitBody Bootcamp organization. I started as a franchise partner back in 2012 after my own through experience. By hard work and the grace of God and some luck, I was able to scale to 5 locations, brought my family on board, my brother Barrett, who you know, my sister, my mom, my wife, Tatiana. So it was a family affair from the years of 2012 to 18. And I learned a lot about business growth and leading teams, et cetera. And that put me in a position to get on the radar of my business partner, the founder of FitBody Bootcamp, Bedros Keuilian, who recruited me to be his vice president and then eventually his CEO when I took the reins in 2021. So since then, I've been on a mission not only to grow my locations, but also to grow our entire brand. So that's a big focus. And our company mission is to inspire fitness to change lives every day. What we do is we deliver 30-minute high intensity, high impact sessions with mindset and nutrition coaching. But why we do what we do, the fact is we're in a health crisis in our country. 50% of our population nearly is statistically obese. And yeah, that's hard from an emotional and a vanity perspective. That's causing all sorts of health concerns. That's all causing all sorts of financial concerns, all sorts of familial concerns. So I have a big mission, a big, I guess, fire in the belly, if you will, to spread fitness, to spread health. So that is definitely front of mind, to continue to spread our mission and grow our franchise system first and foremost. To help with that, to talk to your point, and thank you for bringing that up, I'm authoring my second book. My first book I authored called FitBody Forever. It was a very small book in the grand scheme of things, but I partnered with 2 doctors to help me write that. But this is my first all in. This is going to be the big keynote, if you will. It's called Turn Adversity to Advantage. And we talked about adversity, this particular podcast about the Fortitude Forum, about mental toughness. That's what the book is. It's the basis of self-leadership, mindset, and resilience. And what I've done, it showed up in fitness, it showed up in business, it showed up in my drug and alcohol recovery. I've reversed engineered my 5-step framework on how I've turned adversity, my lowest moments of life, whether it be fitness, whether it be my alcoholism, and whether it be my lack of leadership and lack of business, and how I've turned that into my advantage, not only for me, but helping other people as well. So in the book, I talk about my 5-step framework that I've reverse engineered so that way I can provide that gift and learning lesson to others. So the vision is that book comes out in early 2026, and excited for that. And that's a gift to the world. It's a mindset and leadership gift, but it's also going to be an opportunity to spread FitBody Bootcamp and be a marketing tool to help me do that as well. So that's top on my agenda. And lastly is just continuing to develop the craft of communication and speaking. And I talked about earlier, communication is an ally of leadership. And in order to influence yourself and other people, you need to be a strong communicator, whether that be orally like we're doing right now on a podcast, or maybe that's written, writing emails to your following, or that's on stage. So I'm looking to continue to develop that craft and get on more big stages as we look to 2026 in the following few years. So those are the 3 big things, but really it's grounded in leadership and it's grounded in spreading this gift of health and fitness that is really our greatest wealth. So I'm on a big mission to continue to do that.
Awesome. Expert marketer Seth Godin, I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he said the book that will most change your life is the one that you write. So hopefully throughout this process, you're benefiting just as much as the readers will eventually as well. I know I can't wait to read it. It's going to be awesome. And certainly let us know how we can support that when the time is right. But let everybody know where they can follow your journey. They can connect with you if they want to. Where can they find out more about Bryce Henson?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. All social media handles are real Bryce Henson, not to be confused with fake Bryce Henson. So that's where you can find me. I'm most active on LinkedIn and then Instagram, but all major platforms. And then you go to my website, brycehenson.com, and that way you can learn more about me and also take an opportunity to look at the book as well.
Thanks so much, my man. Really enjoyed this interview, and best of luck with everything going forward. And let's continue the conversation at some point, man. Best of luck.
Bill, appreciate you, buddy. And I'd be remiss not to finish by saying go green.
All right, go white. Awesome, man. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.